to provide the technical support and information that were originally planned as part of our farm to school events with this garden session that Kirsten led at those that were able to happen before COVID changed some of our plans, and has been flexible enough to find alternative ways to connect with people and share the same information. So I will really be passing it over kind of to her from here, and able to support as needed. Go, Kirsten.
Hey, thank you. I want to do shout out. Yes, we did meet, I believe, Tina, right, before, but it's okay. What the point of this is that people can look at it again to just kind of do a refresher. We're going to focus mostly on garden care, kind of checklists, and so kind of the educational pieces. That's for instructors or educators to kind of think about how to turn that into a teaching moment with the garden care, but I can offer up some ideas around that as well. So, and as you know, getting the garden ready for winter means that you're gonna have a great spring. So the more that we are able to do it now, the better. So let's get started. So I'm gonna share my screen. And I'm going to have a good time at this now. All right, so I am going to share my screen. This worked last time we did it.
Yeah.
No worries here. So there's no schools on the call?
Not at the moment. We had a handful sign up, and a few folks are looking forward to the recording, but not at the moment.
Wow, that is just, oh, here it is. Thank you. And then we'll go on to present. It's right here. All right. So this is one of a series. I'm Kirsten Saylor. I was a co-founder of the Minnesota School Garden Coalition and have been involved in multiple roles with the leadership over the years. One of the things we wanted to do was try and help. Our main goal is to help school gardens be as successful as they can be. And so really that's about getting them resources, helping people connect and network. And what we were hearing is people really wanted to collaborate on a regional basis. So we were really super excited to be working with Renewing the Countryside on this. All right, so we have some introductions. Ms. Tina, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about yourself and how you work with school gardens now.
So I'm Tina Moe, and I'm the Wabasha County Statewide Health Improvement Partnership Coordinator, otherwise known as SHIP. I work in Wabasha County with some schools and communities on school-based agriculture and community-based agriculture. So we can provide tools and resources, and also we have done mini grants to support some of the implementations that they may have done at their schools.
Fabulous, fabulous. I just want to also make a mention that I have two hats aside from the workshops that I do. I work with the nutrition services at the St. Paul Public Schools to work on a school garden program to serve up to 64 sites. And I also am part-time a school garden coordinator for an elementary school in St. Paul Public Schools. So a number of different perspectives here. Really what we're going to cover again today is maximizing the harvest. I'm going to do this. Okay, maximizing the harvest. Sorry, you guys, I'm having a little bit. There we go. This is what we're up against. We have a timeline coming, right? For some of us, it's going to come a little bit later. For some, you know, some of those gardens are already shutting down, like they're not producing as much. You can see here that that things like greens could continue, but once you have a snow like this, things are pretty much done unless you have some way to prepare it. We'll get into that. So this is kind of, once this is happening, that should be your signal to rest. So now we work and try to make sure that we're ready for that. Caveat, nobody signed up for the craziness of COVID. Nobody's had any training in this. I will also say that with school gardening, like there are best practices. There is groups coalescing. There are, and community school gardens have been around for over 120 years, but in that same light, we're still learning it on a place and space basis. But in that, I want to just make a note that we are in multiple crises at one time. And so I'm hoping that the gift of the garden is really to help us with caring for each other, showing kindness, and having a break, really. So what I would do is if you could stop recording for one moment, or is that impossible?
It might break us up into two if we stop and start.
All right.
Do.
Well, then I'm just not going to show any faces because I don't know why mine isn't coming up. And 14, it doesn't need to be on a poor show. Okay, maximizing the harvest. So there are a couple things here that I would say first, gather up what you can. Work with the kids to gather up seeds. And even if you never plant those seeds, just one of the things they need to be working on is different shapes and sizes and sorting and comparing and contrasting. I'm in elementary school, so that's where my brain is at. But also, like, we don't have enough time in our lives half the time, and especially during COVID, I know for some of our families, they have been really shut in. So just having that opportunity to be in a safe space to learn, take advantage of that. So it's also a wonderful time to look at colors. And so down here on the lower right-hand side are just a picture I grabbed about some paint chips. And you can go to your local hardware store to grab a bunch. And I would say challenge yourself and have the kids look for the different colors on one of the strips. Have them look for every color on that strip once they've found the first one. And then again, up here, you can see how this chart up here might be a way that you want to look for leaves, because this is the time of year for it, for sure, that match any of these. So it's a simpler way of doing it with shapes and colors, or maybe you just want to see how many different types of leaves you can find. I'm also going to say that cleaning, so when you clean out your spent plants, meaning, so right now hot crops are pretty much done, at least for us here in the Twin Cities, and I bet up north. There are some hot crops that will survive for a little bit longer, like we've had this nice warm weather. But if you see a plant starting to go, then I would remove it. I would remove it sooner and let any of the other plants around it get a little bit more space, maybe a little bit more sun. And also, it just helps keep that garden cleaner. So that can be a job that kids do when they go out. They could be assessing for what plants look like they're done. It could be a challenge for kids to look for those plants that they think might be done, and could they pull them? A little, yeah, so having a little self-control around that space as well is important. The other thing to do is looking at extending the season. Now you might have grown some crops that you might be able to put like a gallon, like a clear plastic gallon jug with the bottom cut off. You might be able to put that over it to help extend it, keep it warmer in there, like beets, turnips, or maybe you planted something early on and want to just kind of help it keep going. I know people have all kinds of like hoop houses and hoop tunnels. I don't have a picture of that here, but seriously, if you Google season extension, you're going to come up with so many different ideas. So I really want to encourage you to look and have some fun with that space. And then lastly, I would, not lastly, but planting the crops that will overwinter. For us in St. Paul, we are all distance learning. So I have been able to do that for my gardens. You can look at things like spinach. Sometimes we'll do that quite well. Other cold crops might do it but maybe after it's frozen, and that's called winter sowing. Garlic, of course, is a favorite to plant right now. And if people are going to plant things like winter rye, that's fine too. I would just try and make sure you're not going to be introducing rodents to your garden that way when the grasses come about.
Kirsten, can you remind listeners what the purpose of planting winter rye might be?
Yeah, it's well, it's typically like a cover crop that might have gotten started. So it can be used like that. I have known that people will grow it for the rye, but typically it's for cover cropping. Thank you for that reminder too, because I also did plant crimson clover in a couple other gardens that we had, and Dutch white clover as a way to do cover cropping. So the big thing here is, and I'm going to get into that, is you see what you can plant now, and that may help protect the soil, help hold it in place, and kind of protect the soil life within. And lastly, plant bulbs for spraying. We have a general policy at St. Paul Public Schools that raised beds should be kind of basically used for growing food. And it doesn't have to be that way, but if you're going to grow food, it needs to be in a raised bed. But you could plant bulbs in the ground for sure. And Journey North has a tulip test garden. So this phenomenology, I'm going to mess that up. It's about tracking phenomenology. So look that one up as well. You can just type in Journey North, and then the tulip test garden should show up pretty fast. You join a whole national, international group of people who are kind of basically looking at when does spring appear by looking at when the bulbs first come up and when they first flower. And you're all using the same type of tulip, red tulip bulb. Oh, there we go. This is also a good practice to get kids into, is thinking about, we've been working in the garden and now we need to take care of things. Some of this stuff might not be good for kids though, but they could assess the garden, have them walk around the garden and look for signs of things coming apart, things that might need repainting, seeding that might need to be replaced or substituted with something else. It's a time to kind of look at your compost bin, and maybe this might be when you move it out, anything that's been done cooking, and put it onto the garden beds. And anything related to water. So again, there's all sorts of water options out there, I know that, but you'll want to see if there's some place, if there's a problem, now's the time to fix it, is really what I'm saying. Repair that infrastructure. So typically these things are going to be done by an adult or someone that is supervised by an adult. So we've certainly had posts that are like, they're rotting out from underneath, and so those need to be replaced or fortified until we can get to that. Sometimes our raised beds or benches get all splintery and we need to sand them off, and then we need to treat them with like a teak oil. Or maybe you want to make a modification. You've learned something about how to work with the bed. And so I'm going to just throw it out there. Like, you've had a raised bed, but you really want to have a ledge around the outside of it, just like a 2x4. So maybe that would be how you're going to modify it. Now's a great time. It's cool, it's relatively dry, and certainly you want to do this now before the spring. Spring is not a good time for doing that kind of work. Also, your garden tools. It's not my favorite thing to do, I'll be honest, but it is a good thing to bring as part of the practice in working with kids. So maybe not all kids, but the kids that show that they can be responsible around it. So you'll see in the picture all the way to the right that they're washing off the soil. In the very least, do that. And then over to the left-hand side, you have someone oiling, and that's really just like a rag with some like motor oil on it, and just really just working it into the blade, working it into the different, into the, oh, now I'm looking for words, just treat your tools with love. So give it a little bit of oil. And then this can be like your breeding spot. Start to inventory and assess supplies. It could be something that kids could do as well. especially young adults or more mature kids, could really sit and try to make a list. So anybody that likes making a list and counting things, this is their job. Hey, any questions before I go any further?
We did have one person join us, Amy. Amy, we did introductions at the top, but would you like to do a quick introduction?
Sure. I'm Amy Sapola. I am a pharmacist at St. Elizabeth's in Wabasha and in the Master Gardener program. And I take care of our hospital garden here along with other volunteers, and also plant and kind of maintain and teach the kids at the Pepin school gardens as well.
Oh, very fun. Very fun. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, all right. If you have any questions, I'll be better about stopping after the next slide. Or you can help me, right, Grace? All right. Then we come to the calendar. And so I really, really recommend make yourself a calendar. So does anybody here already do that? Here, I can show everybody's faces again. Make yourself a calendar, because what you'll be doing with this calendar, it helps you stay focused on what needs to get done and when, and to know what seems realistic. And of course, as you say, you got to cut the hay when the sun is shining. But even if you just have an idea of what you're trying to get to, you'll be able to identify whether you need extra help or if it's not doable. And so you have to kind of manage and assess what has to be done now or what would be nice to get done now. So your calendar becomes a way for you to help organize yourself and be able to start communicate out with others. And so really on that one is, when will the last harvest be? And so I usually kind of shoot for an October 15th date based upon where I live. The tulips planted, now those can kind of happen anytime right in here, these mid-October. That's pretty flexible. I just have to make sure the ground isn't frozen yet. When does the garden need to be winter ready? I usually set it by the end of October, and that way I just want it done. So I could walk away and know that everything would be fine. When does the compost need to be turned and applied? That needs to be done between the last harvest, for sure, or it can be done as we're doing up the last harvest. So it's like the tulips, it might fit somewhere right here in the midsection of October. And that's my calendar, that's my reality. I know down south you guys can go longer, and up north you guys have to end it a little bit sooner maybe. It gets pretty darn cold for us by October 31st, and hands get really cold, even with mittens. So I won't have happy campers out there for sure if they're having to do too much work. If it's a nice day, then they love it. Outdoor repair and care, I would say all of October, but I would end by the 3rd week in October, just so you're able to start moving through everything else that needs to get done. All right, I'm gonna go back because I think I skipped this one. So before I do that, like I told you, I'll stop here. Are there any questions around the calendar?
No, I think that's a great idea.
Thank you. What I would do is share that with all your staff and all your families. And I would do that by email. I would, even if you don't need them, just let them know that this is what your targets are, or these are the activities that need to get done that you'll be working on. That kind of communication can really help, either like provide you with resources or extra hands, or hey, I want to help out with that. When do you need help with that? You just never know. And even if they don't step up this year, they might have it in their head, oh, I'm going to help them with next year. So sometimes that seed just takes a little bit longer to germinate in people's heads. All right, now I'm going to go back. So cleaning and prepping, this is actually the big slide, so I'm glad we're here. So this is just kind of some of the things that you need to get done. These are the primary things I would shoot for. So cleaning up your plants and your weeds. So the more you can get it cleaned up and looking nice, the better. Now, people do talk about winter interest. And so if you do have like pollinator plants, you don't necessarily have to cut them all down. In fact, I don't think I ever cut mine down at all. We just let them fall. But I know in some areas, like where aesthetics are super important, then you need to be mindful of what is not going to piss people off too bad. So the reason why I say that is because you want people to appreciate what you're doing, and you want them to be a partner to you. It's already hard enough doing school gardens. So in some areas, you can talk about why you might not cut down your pollinator stems, and talk about how it's a benefit to other, like the bees, like some of the bees that are out there that will nest inside of them. Again, that winter interest, those are the things you're shooting for. So either that's in an email or you're popping up a sign right outside that garden for passerbys, explaining what you're doing or what you're not doing in this case and why. In the very least though, your vegetable beds, I strongly recommend cleaning them out for two reasons. One is for disease. And the second one is that I have certainly had, when I said, no, it's okay, I certainly have rodents come. So I've had a lot of rabbit poo that just ate up those, it was kale. I just let it go and then I kind of let it be once it froze. Yeah, and you just don't want to introduce any of those potential soil contaminants or potential safe food handling problems with handling your food safely. So you just want to keep poo out of the garden as much as you can. So clean it out and then mulch it. So or add the compost to the beds like we talked about before, and then give it a winter blanket. So we talk about putting the garden to bed, and talking about a winter blanket just kind of falls within that theme. You want to do some kind of mulch. Now, I did make a chart and I did make a handout for this that I'll come to and you guys can access at the end. It does list out different types of mulch, and it lists as pros and cons. I would say for the most part, anything that you can get from your environment, such as leaves or grass clippings, would be what I would use. Straw is another excellent one, but if you're low on funds, those others will work as well. What you need to be careful about is that, again, you're not introducing poo. So dog poo would be the big thing in that case, if it's from somebody's yard. I'm getting a little bit, it's a reality where I live for sure. And then I would treat your beds if you're able to. I haven't treated my beds every year, but when I put the teak oil on, it does make it last longer. And also, it's another thing that kids can really get into. So there is nothing that prevents them from applying the oil. And I'm always surprised with how much they like doing that. I think at that time of year, once everything's cleaned out of the bed, and it's just kind of one more great hurrah for the garden. And especially if it's a nice day. It's a nice way to, well, reset people and help them re-regulate, especially if they've been inside with a lot of stress going on. Being outside, just doing a short project in the garden can really help with that. Apply wood chips as needed. So not every garden has wood chips laid. These should be on the ground primarily for like pathways, or if there's some places where it can't be mowed, or if there's erosion is going to happen, like there's just too much foot traffic for grass to survive, then that's a good place for wood chips, and they just need to be replaced every year or so. Again, prune trees, prune bushes, this is a good time for that as well. And then lastly, before the ground freezes, make sure you are giving all those beds a good water. We've had a really dry spell right now, and I can see it in my plants, even though they're not stressed out by too much heat and too much sun. But give it a good water so that in the spring, especially your pollinator gardens, but I would do all your gardens, your beds as well. They don't need a super soaking, but they should have some soaking because there is soil life in there and you want to make sure that it's supported. And then part of that is, again, take care of your tools. So drain your hoses when you're done. Check with your custodian if what needs to be done with the hose. All right. Any other questions? Any questions? Okay, I'm moving on. You guys, if you have a question, maybe what we could do is you could shoot it into the chat, and then Grace can just share that with me too. Cool. All right. What I would do is, if you haven't done this already, it should be part of, well, this is my garden log, but I also have a garden manual just for my garden that says what are the fall things, what are the things that we need to do in the fall. You could use this list that we have, that right here. You can add to it, you can be more specific. And actually, how did I say that? While this is a garden log, I can't see it very well, I have assessment forms. So again, if I have a child that is really dysregulated and they need to just go do something, I've tried to make this available for any of the support staff that would take them out, or I'll do that with the child. But what it does is just either help them walk around, give them a purpose. Maybe it gets filled out, maybe it doesn't, but it's something for them to start using to notice and observe within the garden. All right. And then I mentioned doing it together. I'm going to hide all y'all now. So if you end up with a larger project that you want to get done, wait, I'm going to go back a little bit. All right. There might be a time for projects, and this is the time for that. So like I said, because we are in COVID, there might be some extra steps you need to do in order to convince principals and custodians or anybody from the district that this is something that can be done. I know we are at the end of September and not all projects are as big as the one on the right. But even if you're just doing something, again, I encourage you to share it out in the very least. And always kind of check base with your custodian and your principal, especially at this time. Maybe things feel fine and that's up to you, but I just can't, it's easy to forget to do that. So plan, of course, plan. So this picture is just part of a larger plan for us to kind of basically revamp these beds. And that was something that we're hoping to get done fairly soon. So these beds are actually starting to fall apart and they're not, we instituted some new codes based upon what we had been learning around safety. And so these are 12 inches high and we're looking for 18 inches high to 2 feet high. So what's gonna happen is the beds on the inside are actually gonna be slightly lower. And I mean, they're gonna be 18 inches and then these two here and maybe these two here are going to be almost 2 feet tall so that they're more wheelchair accessible. And then what you're seeing here, so this is the site that we're going to do the work. As we're building the beds, we're going to be working in this area. And as people come, they're going to drop off their stuff in this blue area and then we'll have cones so that people will keep their stuff organized, like they won't be intermixing. And then we described what we would like for the drop site for the compost. So this is our first preference. And then down here is our second preference. So this map I'm sharing with the district, but it's also something that the parent that I'm working with in this case, we put this plan together. So there's more and more description about what we're gonna do with a budget, a design, look for the beds, what they will look like. And so that we share that not only with the principal and the custodian, and I share it back with the district just to make sure everything's okay. But then it also could be something that gets shared out with the people who step up to volunteer. And one thing that we did note is that folks they'd like to help out. At least in this case, in this garden, it's in a place the parents are there, it has a strong PTO. So that PTO is ready to get started. But we are limiting the number of people that can participate at any one time to 10. And then we want to think about how we're going to run through our day. And so this is not something that we actually put together yet, but this is something that I would recommend to her for moving forward on this project is make sure you take the pictures beforehand of who was there, what the space looked like before, or the project looked like before. I strongly recommend starting with a mindful moment, and I'll show you a link to learn more about that. Again, because of the times that we're living in, but I just think it's a good practice anyway, to help people stop and reflect and slow down. This, as any educator will tell you, will help in the long run to take that time to slow down and get in the right space for it. Be present where you are right now so that you can listen to what the instructions are. In a school garden setting, if students aren't going out regularly, then they are having, it might be a little tougher for them because it's just a new experience. Describe the process for what's going to happen next. So let's say I've had somebody, we've been shutting them over there, go put your stuff over here, and then come and meet us, let's say right by the beds over here in this yellow area. That's where we would make sure we did our mindful moment, talk about the process. We've probably already maybe identified people to do certain jobs based on their skill sets. And then we go through it. And so Ms. McGrath and I are working through how we're going to make that work and work together. So we've divided up the jobs even from this point. Make sure you take pictures during and after so you can share that again. School gardens really rely on a village, and so that village doesn't exactly know who it is until you started to reach out to them. So do so. And then send out thank yous to the people who showed up. And that could be an email, or maybe it's a postcard with a picture of the garden before and after. And then any questions around that? Now, people who have organized.
I have a question for you. When you mentioned that you guys learned about having it instead of 12 inches to 18 to 24 inches because of safety, can you just elaborate on that? And also, what is the best wood, or like what material have you found to use over time that's the most durable in your gardens to build the beds?
Beds?
Yeah.
Okay. 12 inch, okay, so we are an urban school for sure, school district. We get a lot of dogs, we have a lot of people walking through. There's something about 18 inches so that the dogs aren't able to pee on the plants, so you don't have to worry about that as possible contamination. I mean, rabbits can jump pretty far, but if they don't see it, they might not go for it. So it might be another way to prevent rabbits from coming into the raised beds. Our biggest issue has been around, it's 12 inches if you don't have a lot of space between the beds or they're not clearly identifiable. We've noted that sometimes it can be a little bit nerve-wracking to have people walk around and like they're just not paying attention. And so it could become a tripping hazard. It doesn't have to be like that for any district. So there is another garden that I was helping out with, and they have a lot of space. So they'll have a lot more space between the beds. And in that case, the height is not nearly as, it's not as scary, and it's not so much as a safety issue for people in that case. I don't know what that magic number is, but that's coming from our playground guy who's an outside design builder and so that's what he was saying that he wanted to see for standards for our school gardens. I did almost lose, it was very scary. I did have an elderly volunteer who had kind of forgotten there was a bed right behind her. And so we caught her, but just in time, and it's a little scarier. If it was taller, she would just end up sitting right on the bed instead of tripping backwards. The other thing too is that, again, I get elderly volunteers who have trouble bending down. And so actually in the garden that I work in, we got it up to 20 inches, and it makes it a lot easier for not only the volunteers to help with instruction, but for the kids as well, because they're not necessarily having to get down on the ground or bend over awkwardly, but it's just a little bit easier for them to see. So those are some reasons to consider. I'm not saying that it has to be 18 inches. I'm just saying that's what we're asking for in our gardens in St. Paul, to help with like the safety issues around safe food handling, as well as just personal people safety.
And types of wood. Yeah, go. I can add some things maybe. Go ahead.
Amy, what are you guys using right now?
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. We have cedar.
Yeah, cedar is like, that's ideal. I would say that's ideal.
That's at the hospital. And then I think at the Pepin schools, I honestly think it's like pressure treated wood. It's falling apart, and it is old and terrible. So we were talking about, like, do we kind of put a outer coating of wood on it, or do we just tear them down and redo them? You know, kind of coming up with ideas of how to make it less dilapidated. It's giving people splinters.
Right? That's harsh. Yeah, we should just have a whole workshop on bed building, really, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cedar, I don't know. I've been fortunate enough that we've been able to find the funding for cedar, and then I use the corners, raised bed corners from Gardener Supply, and that's like really solid aluminum. And those corners can be used over and over again. So they basically hold the wood in place, so that when the boards go, you can just kind of slide them in and out. So in that case, all I'm replacing is the cedar. I don't think there's a good option. I do think cedar is your better option. I'm not particularly fond of the Trex, but it is also another option. It does bow out a lot faster, a lot easier. It doesn't withstand the same pressures. When I went to 20 inches, I basically had like a 12-inch and a 10-inch board, like two of them, and knock on wood, it's probably gonna happen this year, but knock on wood, they've been holding together really nice, and they're 3x8s. So sometimes people are putting something right at the 4-foot mark, of a long board, and then it's like a T-bar or something to secure it. I'm not answering your question like what you should do. I think you have to make a COVID type of decision right now. If you feel like you need to make the beds better right now, then I don't know. I think it looks kind of weird to have a double-sided bed, but maybe that
I agree. That's
Amy, if you can,
corners. We don't. I've never seen those, so I'm gonna check those out, because I think being able to replace the boards kind of as needed would be ideal. And I think I could probably talk the school into maybe putting a little money into it. They were saying they have some funding, so
that's good. That's good. I mean, those Gardener Supply corners are also really great because they kind of prevent it from bowing out. And sometimes when you use like a 4x4 to connect the corner boards, or even a 2x4, like the boards will still warp or pull away and the screws might come out. But all you have are you have relatively small screws kind of securing the boards to the corners. So you don't have those same issues of some really nasty screws becoming exposed. I just think they're just wonderful. And they look so good even 5 years after I've started using them. Like, they look like brand new. They're awesome. So it makes for a really nice clean look as well. And then they actually have, I know this is hard without pictures, I feel like I should do that, but they have a little cap on the top, so you can pop the cap, and then you have basically a 2x2 square, like a hole, and you can put like a 2x2 lumber down there to like do an instant fence or trellis. Or we've done that before when we knew that the rabbits were liking our garden, and it was 12 inches at that time, so we put up an instant fence for the things that we just planted.
That's super nice. Thank you. Yeah, I'll check those out for sure.
Well, we'll have my email too, so if you don't find it, just let me know.
Okay, thank you.
All right, cool. Questions, others?
Tina, were you about to say something? And I did find a link to at least an 8-inch garden supply corner. So I will put that link in the chat.
The gardener supply corners?
Yeah.
Yeah, they come in all sizes. So, and they have like extensions, so you could really have some fun.
That second link in my chat there.
So what I was thinking is just,
I can learn to understand you much better if I
apparently I'm speaking to my computer. So what I was thinking was just right now there are some funds around COVID-19 and healthy foods. So I was just, if we could think out of the box and link towards how it would support COVID-19 and that sort of thing, it might be a possibility, but a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, during times of economic depressions, it's the support for community gardens and school gardens starts to go up. And that we've seen that over history, over time. And so I'm pretty positive if it's, again, those corners don't cost a ton. So it's just being really clear on what the budget is, how much you need it for, and why you're choosing these items. Because in the long run, it does save money. It saves labor as well to get quality materials up front. Like you're right, those just treated lumber can start to fall apart after 2, 3, 4 years. Whereas the cedar can really hold in there.
Yeah.
Up to 7 years, maybe even longer. So it's worth it. It's worth it in the long run for sure. If you can make it work.
And to your point, Tina, it kind of depends on the funding source, but thinking about this as food access, as healthy outdoor activity, as community connectedness in times of COVID, I'm sure Kirsten or I would be happy to think along with you or any partners about how, if it's not already very apparent, school and community gardens fit into shared goals of some of those COVID funding sources.
And Tina, this is Amy. I too would be interested in talking more about that.
Yes. Were you talking about Wisconsin versus Minnesota too as another aspect as far as SHIP funds? But yeah, I'm always happy to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, and I think at the hospital, it might be interesting to do some of that as well as like a teaching area for almost like a victory garden type of deal. And then also maybe bringing in some of the local schools to kind of even teach workshops here about how they could do it there, or I don't know. I mean, I'd love to say that I can help all the local schools, but also I have to see their interests too. So yeah, I guess we could just see how it goes, but I think that would be super fun. Yeah.
Wonderful. Look forward to setting up a meeting.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, again, there's that power of the garden to bring in some positivity. It's something that people can do. Yeah, good. All right, should I go on? Oh, so again, the school garden, there we go. School Garden Support Network. School Garden Support Organization Network is a network of organizations that support multiple school gardens. And they've been having a number of webinars around kind of related to COVID. And this one was just recent. So if you go, sorry. So if you go to this link here, it'll list all these different kinds of webinars. These webinars that I'm showing you here right at the top, it's definitely worth going down through all of them to look. There's been so much great stuff put together, especially for if you're supporting multiple school gardens, which it sounds like a lot of people who signed up are. This one, right, bringing social emotional learning and mindfulness education to your work, is the one that really was talking about those mindful moments. So I really actually strongly recommend looking at that one, because it is also, it's just intersecting our work so much as educators, that being able to be present so you can engage in learning, or how do you start shifting your brain so you can not always be in reactive mode. Others of interest I think that would be worthwhile is in-person outdoor instruction during COVID. So this is kind of some ideas for how to do instruction, versus the one below it is really around design and infrastructure. And what I found interesting is they brought in somebody to really talk about how to map out areas where you can do outside instruction, just to help kids be outside where it's not as, where it's not as transferable. And then also to break up the classes. So if you have to do, you could do like a hybrid in place. So you could have half the class go outside if you have the staff to support that. Yeah, and then we have some resources here. So today's handout does talk about the things that we mentioned here. So there's a link right there, putting the garden to bed. And then you can contact me at any time. And then this website is to try and put up different kinds of resources for school gardens, and that can be used. So any kind of school garden, right? There's actually a lot of safe food handling stuff on that, just because that is such a major issue for what we're doing. And then, Grace, where are we for time? Should I stop sharing?
Yeah,
or?
we've got about 5 minutes left if we need it. I did just drop the School Garden Support Network /webinars URL in the chat. And Kirsten, if you want to drop that bit.ly for the day, the day's handouts in the chat if you get a chance, just because that wasn't clickable for viewers, but we could certainly make it clickable for viewers in the chat. That would be great.
Yes, I'll just do that now. Oh, what I forgot to share was the next webinars.
And I did copy, and I can paste that again. I did that kind of mid.
All right.
That's in there now. We do have a sign up page for the next 3 webinars. We will put the recording of this, which was a popular approach. I think everyone's really busy, on that webpage as well. So you can share that with your partners as soon as it's all zipped up and ready to go. So anyway, yeah, more webinars on this time, kind of a floating Thursday. It's not always like the exact same third or whatever, but it's like a middle month Thursday, 3:30. Sign up is at that link.
We got those dang holidays in the way, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, you guys, it's been my honor and my pleasure to connect with you all today. So thank you.
Any final questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for making the time. Hopefully we see you at the October, November, and December sessions. And if you have any questions in the meantime, you can contact either of us, both of us, and I can certainly make introductions between people. So if you don't have someone's contact information, I'm happy to play that role.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.